I'm Jason Klom, and this is Comedy on Vinyl. This week, I have the absolute pleasure to speak with a gentleman you've heard on this show before briefly, Mr. Hank Beebe. Thank you so much for doing the show.
Be glad to hear. I'm happy to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about your career as a composer, as a musician. For those who are not aware, you're featured pretty heavily in Steve Young and David Wisenant's Bathtubs Over Broadway documentary, which is a brilliant movie and helps put some focus on work that you've been doing for over 70 years, composing music for corporate musicals. But I'm sure you've done other stuff as well. But as Steve Young has emphasized, a lot of that stuff is comedic, and a lot of it's on vinyl. So let's talk about how you got started in music in general, and where your penchant for working in musicals comes from.
Well, I knew from the age of 16 that I wanted to be a composer, and I aimed for that. I went through my stint in the Navy during World War II, and went back to college and ended up with a master's degree in musical composition. That kind of set me off in the right direction, at least with being classically trained. Mm-hmm. Then I've decided to leave teaching. I taught for a couple of years and started a music department in a school that didn't have one. Wow. And then went on to New York to see what I could do about a career in composing music. It was a daunting thing because I was advised by almost everybody, including my parents and my advisor in college, that I should not try that because my odds were so far against me. And I had to agree that they were telling me the truth, and it has certainly been the case, except that I had to try. Mm-hmm. I did not want to wake up at the age of 55 and realize I wish I had taken that other road, because here I am comfortably retiring now from a job, and I would love to have tried it, and even if I failed, I would have rather have tried it and failed than to not try it.
Yeah.
So I just threw myself into the arena and went around to producers and publishers in New York, and finally got an agent to take me on. He liked my songs that I had written, and he said, I'd like to send you around to audition for the Chevrolet show. Well, in those days, that was a show that featured a singer called Dinah Shore.
Yeah.
It was very... And I thought I was going to write a piece for her. It turned out that the Chevrolet show was not that at all. It was a huge musical, budgeted at $3 million. It was going to be all over the country at the same time to introduce the 1957 Chevrolet models. And they wanted a New York composer to write the music for it. So I was up against some pretty stiff competition. Against big names that were interested because it was a well-paying job, and I guess it was at the end of the third day of auditions of composers that I got a spot, and my brother-in-law and I, who had been doing an act in a nightclub on 6th Avenue, we went and did our act, which I had written as my audition. And 10 days later, my agent called and said, "You won this." He was very shocked because I was very new to the business.
Right.
What, you won the audition? You're doing the Chevrolet show. So that started me in that field. But I'd also had some things in television. Back in the days when I arrived in 1954 in New York to try this thing. Television was wide open to new material. Mm-hmm. It used up so much of it, Jason, that you could go in and you could sell 2 or 3 pieces of material, and they would use it within a month's time. And then they'd ask you for some more because they had used it up. It was all, and it wasn't until later on in the 70s that they realized, the television producers realized that familiar music uh, got just slightly better ratings than new music.
Okay.
So they started to use familiar music, and of course the market for new music dried up, and that was it. But that was one of the things that I did. I also had some pop records that did well. A Patti Page record called "Bring Us Together."
Uh-huh.
I even wrote some English lyrics for an album by Tito Rodriguez, the Latin band leader,
Wow.
who had written his own songs with Spanish lyrics, and my publisher wanted me to write the English lyrics for it. So I did, and that was one of my introductions into Latin music.
That's fascinating. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't ask what that act was that you auditioned with. Like, were you going around, was this a comedy act, a full comedy act, a musical act, both?
Yes, it was. It was called Songs for Squares. And very, very corny. The whole thing was very corny.
Uh-huh.
But the sophisticated audiences loved it. Now, the person we opened for in the nightclub was Janice Mars, who was a singer of very sad songs.
Okay.
And the people went to cry, but it worked perfectly that these two buffoons came on for 45 minutes as an opening act in the nightclub, which was corny and loud and raucous. And the Songs for Squares did very well as an opening act for them.
Wow.
And it also did very well for my audition for the Chevrolet show.
That's okay. Now, has that ever been committed to tape? Has that ever been recorded, or do you have the sheet music? Where does that live?
I have a recording of us in the nightclub.
Oh, wow.
Yep. It was taken from one of the tables, and you hear the audience talking and the applause and everything.
Oh, my
but I
goodness.
Yep.
If there's ever a way for me to hear that, I would love so much to hear it. No pressure, please, but that just sounds remarkable.
Well, I will keep that in mind, Jason.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. That's an amazing. That does not sound like the kind of act where, I guess maybe, is it just where they just, what do you think impressed them most about this audition from a funny song act?
I think most of my music is very tuneful, and it sticks in people's heads. And I have an idea that the tunes that we did for these people stuck in their heads, and that's what made them want to use me, because they wanted the music to stick in the heads of the audiences, because the music contained promotional things that the company wanted them to absorb, to motivate, try harder.
And it's not the same as an ad jingle, because this is the period of See the USA in Your Chevrolet, which might be one of the most successful jingles, at least for cars of all time.
Right.
So, but you had to communicate with the people who were actually making and selling the cars.
That's right. Our whole idea was not to sell the consumer, but to motivate the seller of the cars, make them realize that they could do much better if they worked a little more smarter than they were working. And we would talk to the people who were really successful in that and found out how they did it. And then we musicalized that. We made a musical show out of those ideas. And they sometimes the audience would catch fire with these things and really show the whole thing up in the bottom line of the company, so that next year they asked us to come back and do it again.
Wow. That is a complicated process, because you hear, I hear, because I interview and listen to a lot of comedians talking, and a lot of times they have to go do what they just call a corporate gig, which is where they kind of do their stand-up act, but they do it for a bunch of salesmen, but they don't really care. They're not really there for that. They kind of sometimes laugh. They kind of sometimes don't. Whereas they sometimes they do a little bit of research, whereas you have to do, you have to understand how the ins and out of the business in a way that no other outsider is really going to get a grip on.
That's quite true. We had to get into it quite deeply. Sometimes we toured the country, and just for instance, for McDonald's, we toured the country and spent a day in each of 5 cities around, and had went into 5 McDonald's in each city, and we'd sit there in the booth, and they'd bring people to talk to us. They bring the manager over. They'd bring the guy who turned the burgers over. Some of the people who worked the desk, the front counter, and we would talk to them, and they would talk to us freely because we were not with the company. We were not in a position to take offense of anything they said. They could complain, they could do anything, because we were just professional writers who were able to learn from them what the underlying things were, the motivations of people in that business.
Do you think, is there another, let's say in a science fiction version of this, is there a timeline where you could have gone off and you're no longer doing music, but you all of a sudden become just this business guru who can fix all your problems because you've interviewed so many people at all these companies?
We were interviewed many times when we returned from these trips around the country by people in the advertising part. They wanted to know what was happening out there that they could use. So it was, yes, it was. We weren't gurus anymore. We were just writers who took good notes.
Yeah.
I mean, we had to learn enough about a business so that our audiences, who knew far more about it than we could ever learn in 6 weeks' time, we had to be able to make them laugh. We had to get into their lives enough to know what their dreams were, what they were hoping for, what they were afraid of. We had to get into all that. But in a way, that's what you do for a regular musical on Broadway. You're looking toward what's in the headlines. How are people feeling about what's going on in Washington? How are people feeling about the tax situation? What's Wall Street Journal saying? You pay attention to that sort of thing if you're writing a Broadway show and hoping that it succeeds. We did a show, my writing partner, Bill Heyer, whose birthday this is today, the 3rd of February.
Oh, wow.
And he wouldn't have liked to be around today. He was a very freelance, free spirit guy, and things would be a little tight for him with solitary confinement.
Sure.
Confined. But he would be 94, and I don't think he would like it at all. That's what I am.
Yeah.
Anyhow, he was a very funny man, and we put together a show called Tuscaloosa's Calling Me, But I'm Not Going, which was a tribute to New York, just at a time when New York was at its lowest ebb in 1975. They were about to go broke and default on their bonds, municipal bonds. So we were very lucky in that our show, which was kind of a Valentine to New York, funny about New Yorkers, it opened at just the right time, a kind of more cheerful, even although satirical, look at New York than the one that they were getting in the headlines.
Do you think there's a point where, in doing all this research, you understand just what you think is funny, or do you think you're inside enough people's heads where you're like, this must be what they think is funny too? Do you get a grasp on that from interviewing people?
We do what Neil Simon does. Mm-hmm. Neil Simon says, I don't write for a New York audience. I write what I think is funny and pray to God they think it's funny.
Fair.
And that's the way we worked in a room, and if we laughed like hell, then we wrote it down and used it. Mm-hmm. If we didn't use it. We didn't make any appraisal of what an audience might like. We did make an appraisal of what they might not like. Mm-hmm. Is what I was talking about, if they're worried about what's happening in the stock market, that would make certain subjects not a good idea. There were a lot of research in all of this, but basically, when you're dealing with comedy, we would only go with what we were sure was funny to us.
That's honestly very refreshing to hear. I had this exact same conversation with a guest yesterday or the day before, and I had the same question because my instinct is always to do exactly that, and it does seem to be consistent with people who know what they're doing. Which is, I mean, how can you can't read a mind? You just have to hope that somewhere that's the connection we're going to find is our ability to laugh at the same stuff.
Yeah, we were so fortunate that our audiences were ready to laugh at themselves, which New Yorkers.
Mm-hmm.
Most of our audiences were New Yorkers, and we poked fun at the way they did things, their attitudes, their insular feeling about New York, that it was an island and the rest of the world was outside
Mm-hmm.
of it. Everything happens on this island, and that's it.
Right.
The attitudes toward the sexual mores were where things are a lot freer in certain areas, and about the pride in being a New Yorker and all of that. We went into it quite fully in Tuscaloosa's calling, but I'm not going. And we had to cut 10 minutes out of the title. After a while, people just called Tuscaloosa.
Or what year was the Tuscaloosa musical?
It opened in December of 75.
75. So this is after several years doing the corporate work. Was it any kind of a relief?
Yeah. I did corporate work from 1956 to 1980.
Okay. Was it a relief to do something that wasn't corporate? Did it feel different to you?
Well, it has a different feel to it because there are different requirements. But I love writing. I love composing, and I love writing humor. And I've always been this way since I was 16. And I would do it for nothing, really. And people pay me to do it, but I would do it for nothing because it is very. It's something I love to do, and have always been that way. And when you get together with somebody else who always feels that way too, and you start buzzing things around in the same room, as I did with Bill Heyer, my writing partner from 1960 to 1980. It's really a joyful experience, and you laugh like for 6 hours at a time.
Mm-hmm.
My job was to capture it all. I would put we would improvise a lot, and I would put a microphone of our stereo recorder, reel to reel back in those days, around his neck, and the other mic around my neck, and then we would just go. Turn on, put a tape on, and just go. And I'd maybe an hour's worth, we'd stop, and I'd label the tape, and then the next day, I'd get maybe 5 minutes of really good material.
Sure. That's the way it goes, right? I mean, I once interviewed a guy who self-released 2 records with his best friend. And, from what he remembered of his experience, he lived in New York, was working in New York same time you were. And his friend still lived in, I believe, he lived in the D.C. area. And he would come back home, once a summer. And the one thing they would do is get together, starting out first with a wire recorder, then with a reel-to-reel. And they would sit down for 8 hours at a stretch with some Pepsi and just be over-caffeinated and record comedy for 8 hours that nobody ever ended up hearing except for these 2 small records. But it's exactly that. You take 8 hours and whittle it down to a little bit of something that you hope other people are going to enjoy. But again, it must be the stuff that makes you just giggle the most.
That's right. And of course, our laughter was on the tape. You could tell I didn't have to worry about that.
That's so good. That is do those also exist somewhere? Have any of them been digitized, or would you ever care to digitize them? It sounds like there's a lot of material.
I have boxes of them, and we're just slowly going through them. Dave and Steve and I have been going through them.
Amazing. Oh, that's so good to hear. Okay. That's very good to hear. I always like to know when stuff is being preserved. It's important. It's important, especially when it leads to something. It's always interesting to see the first steps on what becomes something quote unquote bigger.
Right.
What was the first, professional or otherwise, what was the first funny song you ever wrote?
It was called Way Up in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Now I was in school at Chapel Hill in North Carolina. That's where I was getting my master's degree, and I was working with a lyricist down there who was also a very good promoter. His name was Orville Campbell, North Carolinian through and through, and we wrote a whole bunch of songs, including a football song about a football hero named Charlie Choo Choo Justice, who played for North Carolina. But the Way Up in North Carolina started to move on a local disc, a local recording that my partner had put together. He had a Colonial label with his label, and he started to push this thing Way Up in North Carolina number. And before he finished that summer, he had 3 recordings of one on Decca, one on Columbia Records, and one on Mercury Records, and it was all over the country. Fred Waring did it, who was a very popular entertainer with the chorus and orchestra back in those days, and that was the first thing that really got around and became a nationwide item. I was very happy with it, and to this day, it's still on YouTube. I was going through YouTube the other day, and there are 3 versions of that.
Wow!
Of that, that's on YouTube right now. Well, one I had never heard before,
mm-hmm.
By a singer who by a rather honky tonk piano player.
Oh wow!
And he was great. She did a terrific job of it. But that was the 4th version of that song that came out in 51. That was that one. And from that point on, that was 70 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
From that point on, I have been composing for all different things. I do a lot of sacred music for church choirs. That business is a little quiet now with the pandemic.
Sure.
But I've also done a lot of work for school choruses. Again, the same problem over the years. But I never turned down an opportunity. I don't care whether it pays a lot or a little, and I've been in both situations. I do it for the sake of doing it, and
mm-hmm.
I still am. Steve and I wrote a number just recently called "Wear a Mask."
Mm-hmm. It's very good.
A little public service item, which is also on YouTube, and it's a very, very good recording that was made of it, a professional recording, just great.
Yeah, it sounded fantastic.
But it's funny. I mean, it's Steve is a comedy writer from the David Letterman show, and he writes funny lyrics, and so we put together this "Wear a Mask," and it's been, I hope, they've just been listened. It's been taken seriously, even though it's a comedy song.
Sure.
That the message has gotten through to people because our lives are depending on it now.
I mean, that is an interesting line. You don't necessarily think about always. Is just, I got the laugh but is the central point still making its way through, which again you had to be concerned with for that many years of corporate work. Was there ever a time where you had to go back and pare back the laughs because you were like, maybe we haven't made the point? Or did you think, or did you strike a balance every time?
We know pretty much going in, because everything that we do for corporate America was we had to get the approval of the board of directors.
Mm-hmm.
Bill and I would go in at an appointed time in the boardroom of a corporation, and we would push a piano on wheels in there and a stool for Bill, and we would do the entire show, the two of us, from beginning to end, for a group of 12, 15, 20 executives from different vice presidential positions in the corporation, and get their approval. And if we ran amok in there, we had to change it. That's all. If it's something that they felt was not going to work, or we were making fun of Sacred Cow, we would have to pull back. So that was where the corrections came. By the time we got to rehearsals, and by the time we got into the theater, and we were well edited by the brass, so that nothing untoward was going to happen.
That makes sense.
But it all depended on the sophistication of the executives. McDonald's, for instance, a very sophisticated at that time, a very sophisticated group of executives who knew what we were doing was going to help them, and they gave us free hand. I mean, we got very little criticism and very little resistance.
Wow.
On the other hand, on some of the car companies, which tend to be a little bit more reserved and careful and conservative, we didn't have as free a hand, and we would go ahead and just give them the whole shot. And if they said no, we don't want you to go in that direction, we would correct it. That's all. We would write something else that was more dignified.
That makes sense. I got to tell you, the dread that came over me as you mentioned a room full of vice presidents, that sounds like the most humorless audience possible.
No, that's not the most humorless audience we had. Most humorless audience we ever performed for were the executives of a network.
Oh.
One of the three big networks. We did their affiliate show. You know, they had a huge industrial show for all of the people who owned the stations that ran that network's material. And so we, when we finally got it on, and they were the least responsive audience I've ever seen. I think people in the entertainment business, especially in television, feel that if they laugh, they are not being professional.
Right.
And so they didn't. They sat on their hands. They didn't applaud much, and it was very hard to realize that we'd put in work all this work on the show, and made sure that it was funny, and then not have the response in the audiences. On the other hand, to some of the audiences of Seagram, for instance, a House of Seagram, were raucous. They loved the humor. They loved to them it was like being at a party. And, of course, selling alcohol was their business, and parties use alcohol, and so we were right in line with that. So the humor went over very well with those. So there were humorless audiences, and there were also wonderfully raucous audiences.
I mean, yeah, you know what? The alcohol company does make a lot of sense. It's very funny to me, though, how, again, as you say, how kind of... picky that particular whichever network that was that's very funny to me. I'm trying to look. Okay, so so I didn't realize this. So there is an LP of Tuscaloosa's Calling Me. which I didn't
That's
realize.
right.
Great cover. I love it. Oh my goodness, I love it. So
Yeah, Vanguard Records.
there we are. Yep. Wow.
Yep.
Love it.
It sold for like 20 years after the show closed. It was still an item on the in the record stores.
That's great. Wow.
Yeah, it was a long time, and we've done many other productions of that, not in New York, but around the country in various places. We've licensed the show, and people in musical theaters and on a community level, summer stock, that sort of level.
Yeah.
But it's had a kind of interesting life. It just keeps popping up every once in a while. We like Steve brought me Steve Young of Bathtubs brought me a video that he had taken with his iPhone of a woman singing the finale of Tuscaloosa in a nightclub that had people at 6-foot spacing and wearing masks and everything.
Oh wow!
And the song was all a love song about New York, and that we're still here, we're still doing it, we're still being New Yorkers. It's very touching.
Yeah.
But he performed it as part of her act, the finale of Tuscaloosa.
Huh. That's remarkable. I love it.
Yep, it was very touching to me too.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, maybe we don't all necessarily heavily long for that kind of longevity, but when you get it, you're not going to turn it down. That's, come on.
That's right.
Come on.
Well, Bathtubs is getting that now. Bathtubs has had its run. It did. First of all, it did all of the film festivals all over the world, for that matter, and then it had its run in commercial theaters, where it ran and was held over in many of them, including in New York, and then it went on home video, home watching on Netflix, and it's still on Amazon Prime. And just last week, it started on Netflix in Australia.
Oh, great! Wonderful.
So Bathtubs is really having a kind of constantly reborn existence. Steve calls it the movie that wouldn't die. But it's true, it has had that sort of constant popping up because people love it so much, and can certainly understand that.
You always hear stories of when somebody does something corporate or does something on the corporate dollar. Did you ever get to sneak anything in, not for anybody else, but something for you, like a sly joke between you and your writing partner that nobody else would get?
No. We were too busy to fool around with something like that. We were much more. We did one show, got it on, and then went right to another show. It was like there wasn't time for us to do that. We did do a lot of in-jokes.
Sure.
In other words, things that only that audience knew about, so that it was really for them, tailored for them. And you could have somebody walk in from outside, and they would have no idea why everybody was laughing.
Sure. I had a feeling you would have to work with that, because that's the way into their hearts. I have a feeling.
Well, it was the whole idea. The whole idea was to raise their expectations, to make them realize that they were capable of much better performance than they were doing, and that it wasn't going to require so much more work, but to work more smartly, to apply their intelligence a little bit more to their job, and to realize, as we found in many of these corporations, that the work they were doing was also socially beneficial to the country, to the economy, or to, in the case of diesel, the diesel division of General Motors, where they didn't realize that where those diesel engines had been extremely helpful in draining swamps and doing all kinds of things that built up the country, built up the economy, and the incomes of people, the farmers, were saving lives of people on the high seas with a fishing boat, picking up survivors of a sunken vessel, all sorts of things we could dramatize for them, so that they would feel a little bit more of the significance of what they were doing in sales of diesel engines.
That makes sense. I did ask Steve if there's anything he thought I should ask you about, and he did mention, now that you bring up the Detroit Diesel one, he did say that a song called Daddy's AFAs got a huge roaring laugh response from the Diesel audience.
That's right. The AFA was the repayment. A lot of these guys use their own money to put out advertising and all kinds of promotions and everything for diesel engines. Among the companies who would buy them, the automobile companies or diesel engines for boat builders and so forth, truck builders. They would do that. They put out their own money, and they would get repaid by the central company in Detroit in a thing called an AFA. It was the I forget what the initials stand for, but it was their repayment for the money they had invested. And sometimes these AFAs were late.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the company didn't get around to getting them into the hands of these distributors until months later. So what we did was to get a young girl and put her in very poor, very ragged clothes,
Mm-hmm.
on her knees scrubbing the floor. And her first line was, "I'm going to go to college when Daddy's AFAs come in." And it was such a shot of laughter, of recognition of two things. One, that we were bringing up the subject, the sore subject,
Mm-hmm.
that was them. But the other was that the company would allow it. And this huge shot of laughter came through, and the rest of the lyrics nobody heard. And they were very clever, very good, funny lyrics. But all they heard was, "I'm going to go to college when Daddy's FAAs come in," meaning she was going to be scrubbing floors for forever because these things were so delayed.
Mm-hmm.
And it was wonderful to hear that release, because and release of anger that was sitting in these guys, and as a result, it was a wonderful steam valve that was let off.
Yeah.
So the anger and the resentment in these guys of waiting for this money to repay them, they're having to operate in debt.
Mm-hmm.
Because they weren't getting these repayments in time. But it was an inner joke. Nobody would ever, from the outside, have understood why that was happening. But it was a completely inside joke.
Yeah. But, I mean, that is also the nature of any good joke, huh? I mean, that's the perfect landing of a joke, too. When you have figured out the situation the best way possible, and you're like, well, I think this is the best way to make this joke, and you just go for it. You commit to it that whole setup is beautiful. And, you can't ask for anything better than that kind of reaction.
I know. Yeah. I wish I had a recording of that moment.
Uh-huh.
That would be great. Unfortunately, they were very new. Detroit Diesel was very new to that, to the industrial show, and they didn't know how it's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
They just hoped that it would do its job, which it did, of course. But nobody thought we ought to film this or we ought to record it at the time.
Wow. That's amazing. I was just looking just to see if I could find, just a bit more about some of your early music. Was so who was the first person to record way up in North Carolina?
Okay, I put together a group of 2 girls and 3 guys who were music students, and they were all very, very much up on singing together. And we put together a recording of it. And Orville, my lyricist and promoter, sold our version of it to Mercury Records, and that's the one that went around the country.
Okay.
First, and then it was covered by Columbia with a guy named Champ Butler, who's a Southern singer, and he fit well character-wise in it. And then there was one done by a disc jockey, and I've forgotten his name. WNYC, I think, disc jockey, or WNEW disc jockey of the time, very successful. I guess I've always wanted to record, and Decca gave him this song to record. Very unusual for a New York disc jockey to sing way up in North Carolina, my home sweet. But he did, and it came off. It was a seller. So
that's great.
You never know about those things.
Yeah, of course. Wow, that's fascinating. What was it like getting to? This is not something I've really experienced, other than maybe a CD here or there. What's it like holding your own record in your hands the first time?
Let me think. I think the first thing I did was to frame it.
Yeah.
Yep. I think I have it around here somewhere. Yeah. Yep. That was. Yeah, I do have it. I wouldn't be able to put my hands on, but I have copies of those records back then. They were all quite fragile.
Sure.
They were made of Bakelite, and they were 78 revolutions per minute.
Yeah.
78. And this was pre LP 33 and a third, and pre 45.
Right.
So, but it was I was always glad to see my things done professionally, and with the beautiful artwork some of these artists do on covers, which are really good work.
Yeah.
But actually, I would frame it and then I forget it, because my favorite show is my next one.
Sure. I can appreciate that. Yeah. That's how you keep going.
Yeah, and I still am now. I'm writing something every day, and I'm hopeful that my days keep going, because according to statistics, I'm on borrowed time as it is at 94. But I'm enjoying my work, and I always have. And I'm still with the same wonderful wife, Nancy. We've been married 68 years.
Wow. I wonder, so if you're writing music every day, does that involve you just sitting down at the piano and going from there, or do you write longhand and then you play it out on the piano?
I used to work at the piano all the time. Now I have done it for so long that I work it in my head. And then I write it down in pencil on a piece of manuscript paper. And when I've got it the way I want it on the manuscript paper, then I transfer it via the computer to my Finale software, and it comes out printed.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's kind of remarkable. That's kind of wonderful.
And then when I record things, I use a digital recorder, and I have 8 tracks, so I can overdub myself so I sound like a male chorus.
Love it.
And sing all the harmony parts and things like that on some of my newer stuff.
Mm-hmm. I would love to know, so obviously, Steve and Dava went and made that documentary, which of course ruins the collector's market for Steve in the process, but he did tell me he's got most of what he wants. But I would love to know if people are out there, regardless of value, is there one particular corporate one that people should seek out that you're particularly proud of?
Well, I think it's chosen itself. I haven't chosen. I didn't need to choose it. It's Diesel Dazzle.
Okay.
And it's because it is such an unlikely article to glamorize.
Right.
I mean, it's one thing to glamorize a Chevrolet, which is a beautiful car to start with, but another thing to glamorize something as utilitarian as a diesel engine. And so when we did glamorize the business, and for a fairly well, apparently, we were at the top of our form in 1966, I think that was when it was, Bill and I, and we did some of our best work for that show, and it just rose out of the pile itself and showed itself for what it was. Don Bowles, who used to was in the movie, you may recall, a former rock star. He discovered our work through Diesel Dazzle. That was the first one he ever paid attention to, from the punk point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can see how broadly the Diesel Dazzle score appealed to people, young and old, regardless of what your background is. It just happened, and we were never satisfied with anything but first-rate shows that we worked on. But this one exceeded that.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. And it's one that I do keep my eye out for these every once in a while. I am by no means the collect. I think I have one. It's not a musical though. It is a corporate. It was done for IBM out here in Santa Monica, but there's no music, which is the part that's just like, how did people sit and listen back to this? There's no music to sing along to, which kind of blew my mind. I don't even know.
Well, that's
what
the way it always was before
Yeah.
we got it. Before writers and composers got into the business in the 50s,
Okay.
1950s, it was that way. That's the way sales meetings were held. They had one speaker after another, and some of them were known as motivational speakers, and they did a pretty good job. But it got to the point where they wanted to do better, and somebody hit on the idea of having a musical, write a musical about it, and see if the kind of the persuasiveness of musical theater. I think that's the word I was looking for. The persuasiveness of musical theater working for them, and that's what happened. When we got into it, we were much better at persuading the people in that audience to try harder than the motivational speakers were.
Mm-hmm. That is a lot. First of all, it's a lot to put in your hands, but obviously you killed it. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, man, to have that kind of trust put in you, and then to just, again, I mean, but you're doing it the right way. You're just, well, what works the best for me? What do I think is funny? What do I think is a good song? That's really all you can't read minds.
That's right. You use your intelligence to tell you, oh, this is too strong for them,
Mm-hmm.
or let's not go in this direction. It doesn't feel right for them. Mm-hmm. You had that kind of instinct, but basically, you would never go into a presentation to the board of directors without having confidence that it was funny because you thought it was funny.
Right. My goodness. Hank, I have had a lot of fun speaking with you. Where can people find your work online besides hunting down some older records of yours?
Oh, there's a lot on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
You just go in and say songs by Hank Beebe, and you will find a huge number of them sung by choruses and individuals and all kinds of places.
I'm seeing that Tuscaloosa's calling me. I can get it on Discogs.com. I can get it for a reasonable price, so maybe I'll have to pick that up on vinyl. Also, If they go to HankBeebe.com, they can get all of your recent work too, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's quite comprehensive and offers my latest things. Yeah, right.
That's wonderful. And everybody should go watch Bathtubs Over Broadway because it's just a
By all
it's a
means,
good movie.
you'll never regret it.
No, it's too good. Anything that's. I think I said it every time I interviewed Steve about it, but it's one of those movies that I saw going one way entirely and did not see it coming out the other end with him having this sincere love for this stuff.
It's true. Yep.
Hank, thank you so much for talking with me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Jason. Anytime. This is fun.
And I want to thank everybody for listening. And as always, have a good thing. Comedy on Vinyl is a production of StolenDress Entertainment. It is produced by Mike Warden and is hosted and edited by Jason Klom. Our theme song was composed and performed by Richard Levinson. You can email us at podcast@comedyonvinyl.com. You can also send snail mail to StolenDress Entertainment, P.O. Box 805, Burbank, California, 91503. Subscribe to Comedy on Vinyl on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else you can find podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It helps. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Comedy on Vinyl, or find everything in one place at comedyonvinyl.com. A major portion of Comedy on Vinyl has been underwritten by Stand Up Records. Please visit standuprecords.com for all your comedy needs and tune in to the new Stand Up Records channel available on the Roku, where you can also find select episodes of this podcast. Visit StolenDress.com to listen to our other podcasts, watch videos, and imbibe freely of our multimedia content going back 15 plus years. StolenDress Entertainment.
Hey, it's my turn. Ah!